What's going on, everybody? Back again for another episode of Sunday Reset with Will and Friends. This time brought to you by our friends at Old Elk Bourbon. This is actually their Old Elk 9, aged 9 years. Their straight bourbon whiskey is truly incredible. And today on the show, I've got my friend, Daniel Nicholson. Daniel Nicholson is the client relations manager for Middle West Spirits. He's also the founder and CEO of Cbus Barrels.
Cbus Barrels.
Yes, Cbus Barrels. And we're going to talk a little bit about that name here in a second, but we've gotten to know each other through various conversations with the same people. And his story is so cool. And I just wanted a chance to have that out there for everybody. So Daniel, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me, Will. I'm excited.
So happy to have you here. And so what we were kind of talking about beforehand, my audience that is listening, one thing that's been always true for me is the version of the show, as it makes sense in my head of what it's supposed to be structured like, is two friends sitting on my back patio, having a conversation about what's going on in their life, maybe having an adult beverage, which we get to do on this one. And the audience is my neighbor. They're listening in and they're going, oh, that's an interesting story. I got to keep hearing this go. So that's how I've always seen it. So thank you for helping me set up this scenario for real.
Everything better with a little bit of bourbon.
Okay, so then let me ask you. Cbus Barrels, you have this idea. I mean, watch, if you haven't seen the clip of those, for those listening, it's these barrels that make you feel like Thor, because you got this barrel that is just sitting there ready for you. It looks normal, but all of a sudden your glass comes right up from the middle, filled with bourbon or whatever you want. You can even do cocktails. Am I wrong?
Yep, you can Jack and Coke it. There's 2 lines, so you could do a gin and tonic.
See, and so how does one get the idea to even pursue something like this?
So it was a organic kind of thing that came to fruition. I was working in my garage making a cabinet, and a guy walks by and he's like, "Hey, those are really cool." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, man." And he's like, "My brother invented this machine called the Cervita drink dispensing machine." He's like, "That would look really cool in your barrels." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." Didn't think much of it. And then 6 months later, me and Dan, he's the creator of the Cervita that goes in the barrel, we linked up, started a partnership, and now it's a thing. Now there's a fusion of like old world whiskey barrels with futuristic tech fused into one. And I think that's kind of what catches people's attention. Is a whiskey barrel has been the same for centuries, and now something as dumb as having your whiskey barrel pour your drink, and it just like blows people's minds. So it's definitely a showpiece. It's a flex to have one.
That's exactly what I thought. I was like, what a flex. Like, not that I can't pour my own drink, but it's like, should I have to?
100%. There's so many people on Instagram that are like, "That is so dumb. I could just pour my own whiskey." I'm like, no, I get that. Like, we don't need automatic window buttons in our cars, but it's convenient so we don't have to roll it up,
I'll do you one better. Why do you have to go to a bar and have them pour you a drink?
See?
You go for the environment, you go for the ambience, you go for all these additional things. Your barrels create a vibe.
Yeah. It's eye-catching. It's one of the things that's just, it's fun. People take life seriously, and there's a time and a place for that, but that's kind of not what I make these for. It's just for fun. You have somebody over and you're like, "Hey, go push that button on the whiskey barrel, put your glass on the table, and watch it." And it's just it's a really cool moment. It's a really cool thing that can, bring people together. It's a conversation starter. So it's been fun.
I mean, think about it. A car gets you from point A to point B, but there's a reason people buy a Porsche.
Right. 100%.
It's a lot of fun to drive, So life's too short, as you pointed out. So, but in that same breath, as I'm thinking about it, you've got a day job, and now you're doing this. Like, when this really started to become a true business, what did that look like in your life, in your home life?
It was ironic. I started doing it out of just a genuine curiosity because I'd seen some videos of people doing it, and it came more natural than I expected. I think it's cool because it's one of those things where I started this with no woodworking experience at all. So I've built it up to a point where I'm very, very confident in the products that I put out. And that's over 2.5 years. So I think it's one of those things where you just have to start. Like my first barrel, the door was messed up. It had like an underbite. The door was just sunken in a little bit. It wasn't perfect, but it was still pretty good. So I think that's the thing that a lot of people fail to do, is just do. You have all these thoughts and you have the ability to do so much and create so much in your life. Just do it. You might not be great at it, but you put the reps in.
You could never be a true master if you can't like embrace the fact that you're going to suck for a period of time at anything you do. And I think that gets in so many people's way as they're so afraid of sucking for a period of time. But it's not about their own, inferiority. It's how they're going to look to everybody else around them.
Right.
And I love this quote. I didn't write it, and I wish I could give credit to whoever did because I don't know who said it first. But it's everything is cringe until it works. You see that with social media. You see it with building a business. You see it with all these different things. It's, everyone around you is kind of like, fuck's that guy doing? Like he's really making a barrel. He's not even making the barrel. He has the barrels, and then he's got this glass coming. I can pour my own drink. Why?
Right.
Why do I need this? Until it works.
Yeah, that's why it's interesting because my neighbors all know me. The neighbors directly across the street, they call us the Donkey Kong house because I mean, right now I have, like 7 whiskey barrels in the garage. It's not a normal thing, you know? So there was like a stigma even in the beginning when I started doing this, like my neighbors are going to just see me in the garage with whiskey barrels and just think I'm like some crazy alcoholic doing some crazy stuff in his garage
I
or
mean, look, you do drink for a living at your day job, and then your side hustle also involves whiskey barrels. It's not a terrible leap.
it's a gift. It's a gift. But yeah, and it's one of those things. Like I said, my wife wanted to film a reel where she's pushing a whiskey barrel in the front yard, and it's if you're walking down the street and you just see somebody pushing a whiskey barrel through their front yard, you're like, what the hell is going on? But that's become my daily life, and I think that's part of it too. Is like there's a slight uncomfortability. Is that how you say it? Uncomfortability with just doing what I do and being like this guy that just has all these whiskey barrels all over. And, you just kind of have to fully embrace whatever you're doing, you know? So I think that's one of the neat lessons I learned from this was, like I said, just do it. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks or says, or you might be the Donkey Kong house, but if you're enjoying it and you're getting fulfillment out of it, that's the most important part. And like you said, keep growing and putting the reps in, and that's all that matters. You'll get better.
So let's take a step back for a second. So pre Seabus barrels, pre anything, you're working at Middle West Spirits. So how did you start working there? What was that path even like?
So I moved to Columbus 2017 to manage my first restaurant. So I was a kitchen manager, and then things evolved. I ended up being a general manager, assistant general manager. I ended up working at Service Bar, which is Middle West Spirits restaurant attached to their bottle shop. So I started doing that, and I realized I have 4 kids. I can't be a restaurant manager my whole life. The hours were crazy, so it turned into this thing where I was like, I can't. So I actually was going to get a job as a food distributor. I'd put in my 2 weeks notice at Middle West Spirits, and I'd gotten close with the COO, and he referred me for a project management job within Middle West Spirits. So I always tell people, like on paper, resume wise, if I was applying for a project manager job at a massive distillery, it doesn't look like I would be the one getting that job, just with restaurant manager experience. But the relationships that I built, I got really close with our controller, our head accountant at Middle West as well, working through those times. So those 2 people really advocated for me to get the project manager job. And I've told this to everybody because it's been such a big influence in my life. It's not just networking. People talk about networking in business all the time. It's relationship building. You build relationships and that opens doors for you. So I feel like if I wouldn't have built those relationships within Middle West before I ended up having that door open for me into, the corporate side of things, it wouldn't have happened. So I think people put all this value on networking, which is huge. It's really big. But what I've learned from my personal growth is those relationships that you build along the way, those can be the catalysts that open that next chapter in your life. So that's kind of what got me into Middle West Spirits. And then a little bit over a year ago, I got promoted from project manager to client relations manager. So it's been great. The journey's been awesome. Learning about whiskey and barrels and all this stuff has been continuing education. Every week there's new stuff to learn.
I love that. you got into one career field, you had a realization like I can't keep doing this life for my family. And as someone who just worked in a number of restaurants, like I get it, the hours are crazy and it's all over the place. And you at a certain point you go, this is a game I can't play anymore, or I don't feel comfortable playing anymore. People do with kids, but it's hard. And so if you can find a path forward, and so then you said something that I thought was really interesting. There's networking and then there's relationship building. So I think in my head they're two different things. Networking should be relationship building, but a lot of people's image of networking is ultimately very shallow. It's very much, hey, I shook your hand, you now know my name, great. I'm gonna move on with my life. And
Transact.
it exactly very transactional. Whereas like building a true relationships with anyone is something that you can leverage on both sides. You should both be getting something out of this deal. So how would you describe the way you built relationships both internally to get the project manager job, but then also the client facing role now? Like how has relationship building changed for you?
I think it's been a natural thing in my life. Being able to connect to people is one of the main things. Being authentic is huge. It's like when we first had our first conversation, I was like, this dude is really cool. We immediately clicked because it didn't feel like, sometimes you'll meet people and there's a facade that you can tell is there. Just like, they're putting on the Ritz for you. They're doing more than they would do if they were just sitting at home talking to a buddy, you know? So I think that is something that more and more people are like, they're thirsty for it because the world with, whether it's AI or, people don't really trust the news or whatever, people are longing for something that they can connect to and feel like that person is authentic. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to connect at Middle West Spirits, on a client relations side, the clients that I have with C-Bus Barrels, but then like these relationships that I'm building, whether it's through podcasts or, just meeting new people on a whim, if you come into that conversation and you're your true self, there's something that breaks a wall down for other people and allows them to reciprocate in a world where a lot of people have to have walls up. So I think that's big. And like I said, I think that's why you and I connected when we had that first conversation, because it doesn't feel like there's the bullshit wall that we're both trying to put out.
Yeah, for those who are, well, no one's aware except maybe my wife, because I probably annoyed her that night. Because I had just come in here just to edit a podcast and I was going to be done. Then you shot me a message on Instagram. And then I was like, did you want to just hop on a call? And then we were on the phone for what, like an hour?
Yeah, it was an hour. Wife came downstairs. She opened the door and she looks at me. It was like what, midnight or something. She's like, "Who are you talking to?"
Mine was already asleep. So was my child, thankfully. But she was like, how late were you up last night? I was like, oh, I don't know. It was like 12:30. And she's like,
Yeah.
what were you doing? I'm like, well, I was doing this. And then this guy with the barrel company was talking and we hit it off. I don't know. She's like, I'm aware of who you are. Like, that's just who I am as a person. It's never going to be a short conversation. Cause I agree with you. I think people long for that. And as someone who has a lot of value in building great relationships, like that's so important to me. Is us never losing that. My favorite compliment that I received on my book was the one I kept hearing over and over again, which was when people read it, they were like, that sounds like you. It sounds like you were talking to me. And that's the only compliment I'll ever need. I don't care about the syntax and grammar. I don't care about any of that. Tell me tell me that it sounded like a real person wrote this to you and spoke to you. And that's all I needed to hear because that's what I care for. That's everything that I've ever tried to do. And again, that's what I loved about our conversation was once I realized I'm like, oh, this isn't just look, when you have a podcast, people hit you up all the time and being like, I want to promote my business. How do I do this? And it's fine. Like some of that's fair because there's still a good story there.
Right.
But I could tell like you reached out and you were like, dude, I just love what you're doing and I want to be a part of it to help in whatever way I can. And that spoke to me. So I want to get back to your story though. So you're working at Middle West. You've kind of parlayed your relationship building into this career that's been really cool for you and stuff. So then you already kind of talked about you were just doing something in your garage. You met your partner who helped you with getting the whiskey into the barrels. But before that, like what made you decide to start working with whiskey barrels as a craft? You said you don't have a woodworking background.
No. So I was like, I made the first one and I was like, this is decent. I was like, it's pretty good. So
Made the first one what? Before it can pour? Or what did you do with the
no,
barrel?
so the one that pours, that came about a year ago. So roughly a year into me making the cabinets, that one came to fruition. But before that, I was just chugging along, making regular, I say regular, but cabinets out of whiskey barrels. So I started selling those. We started getting some good traction. My wife had to stop working because we lost our babysitter. So
Yeah, that'll do it.
we went into stay-at-home mom mode, and I've always been the person who I'm not gonna sit here and I'm not gonna be like, "Woe is me." I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, how are we gonna do this?" I'm gonna be that person who looks at what I have around me and sees what I can do with it to have the best outcome. So, that's what happened with these barrels. When I sold the first one for $400, my initial investment in tools was $300. So, 1 barrel sold, recouped my cash, got a little bit extra, and then it just started snowballing, and then it turned into, you know, what we have now is, it's not a cheap thing. I'm not selling a $15 thing. Like,
Yeah, this
it's a
is not
lot
an
of fun.
IKEA something you could put together in an afternoon and it costs you $10.
Yeah. So it's helped me to hone in, and I'm like, I started doing this 2.5 years ago. I'm pretty good at woodworking, but when somebody buys something from you that costs $1,500, there's a higher level of expectation. So it's been a gift and a curse because it's making me troubleshoot more. It's making me look for imperfections because it's like, I don't need my stuff to be absolutely perfect. You don't need your podcast to be absolutely perfect. But when I'm trying to enter into
Fumbled
this,
literally at the beginning of this episode.
oh, I love the authenticity. But yeah, it's just like, but I need to be able to focus in. If I'm trying to put out a premium product, I need to change my brain into looking at it like a premium product when I'm doing like my QC. So probably the same for you when you're entering into an episode or you're going to go into editing. You know, I want to enter this next level, which I feel like I am, but I have to hold myself to a higher standard now because that's what my customers, the people that are out there, the people that are going to view these podcasts, whatever, they'll always hold you to a higher standard. So it's been interesting, it's been fun. But now that it's turning into a real thing, it's not just as fun. It's more like, oh, I need to take this a little bit more seriously and really hone in.
Do you ever feel like that higher standard, for lack of a better word, I'll say perfection? Do you ever feel like that's at odds with who you are? Because authenticity is so important to you. Do you ever feel like those two worlds are at odds?
I think there's a place where they kind of live together, like that yin and the yang. Um, from a creative standpoint, I always feel like, these are almost like pieces of art. Everyone is custom made, this and that. So there's the creative side of it and there's the perfection side of it. And it's just like letting those meet in the middle, where I love my art and I know my art is going to be as good as it can be in the moment, but then still think about how do I optimize? How do I come up with the next iteration? So it's the balance for me.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, I'll admit I struggle with this a bit because I'm someone who thinks things that are overly polished, it just screams fake. But at the same time, when well, I don't care if it's for money or it's for your friends and it's stuff. There's something to be said for you putting that little bit of care into the details that shows people, frankly, that you give a shit. I'll never forget this in my day life, and I was working in the software field, and I was meeting with a big client. I had something going on, and my slide deck that I had was fairly simple and straightforward. And I was talking to another person on the account with me, and he said, hey, I'd do this, and I was like, that feels like fluff. It feels like, frankly, it feels like bullshit. And he goes, I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand that there's an expectation here of effort that you have put in, and that means something to them. Whether they look at the slides or not is kind of irrelevant. They need to know that you put in the work and you didn't just walk in here half-assed. And that kind of turned a switch for me, which is that it's as much about people feeling like you're dedicated to whatever that is that they're asking of you as much as it is the actual outcome. So that's how I come to terms with it, is like this, like, it's the yin and the yang like you were describing, but it's also, I want everyone to know that I give a shit. And if that little bit of extra effort on the details, even if it doesn't feel like it matters to me, it matters to them. And that's what's important.
Yeah, I think that's where, like you said, if we're talking yin and yang, I have the perfect example for what I do. So when I'm here in the workshop and I'm making this stuff, I'm like, I want to make it as perfect as possible. You know, I want to troubleshoot and do this and that. But so I had posted my reel. My reel's at like 600,000 views right now. And my
Which is
wife,
crazy, by the way.
no, it's changed some things over here. But my wife got pissed because she's normally the one that does the social media, and you know she'll edit the video, she'll take time, and she'll really dive into making these videos look good. And all I did when that video was posted, I was like, I don't know. I'm gonna post a video tonight. She was like at the store. So like I just took a quick video, just bullshit. I threw up like the whatever dumb caption came to mind, and then wake up the next morning and it's like 60,000 views. And she's like, I don't understand. She's like, I've spent hours editing stuff before. She's like, and
Uh-huh.
this one that you took 3 minutes of your time to take this video, write a caption and post it, that's the one that blew up. And I was like, I was actually talking to Mick about it when I was down in South Carolina. He was like, a lot of stuff, you know, people will polish stuff up, but when something hits and it's authentic, sometimes people like to see that unedited, unpolished version. And that I feel like is part of the reason that video that I had, you know, kind of go viral connected, because it wasn't just polished. It wasn't just like look like somebody in a studio made the video and it was all shiny. You know, it was just a dude who made something cool that was like, hey, everybody look at this, you know?
Exactly. I mean, and you know, I'm a fan of Mick and we're friends, and he's exactly right though. I think, and you even touched on it earlier, you know, I think in a world where there's AI and there's a lot of things going on, I fundamentally believe, I had a full blown argument with a friend of mine about this because he's always so confused. He's like, but this video was so well edited and all these things. Why is that not hitting? And it's like, it's not, because people, it screams slop. It screams something that was manufactured as opposed to this raw edited thing. My highest performing video organically to date is me talking about nachos. I swear to God. Of all things, I talk about mental health. I talk about a lot of things that matter to me. And I love for those videos to do well. But my biggest video to date, and it's still like today, it's been weeks and it's still getting views. It's still getting stuff. It's just me talking about how I'm tired of restaurants doing nachos where they stack them super high because then none of the good stuff gets on the bottom layer of chips.
You
We
only
need
get
to
the
do
top layer.
yeah, we need to do a flat layer of chips across the board, make it long ways, not high. That's all I said. It was like 12 seconds. It's just me talking into my phone, and that was it. And out of nowhere, it was at 135,000 views. And I'm like, what happened?
You're like, all the smart stuff, all the deep intellectual things I've dove into, and this
The
is
things that,
what you people want to see.
but it's fair, right? Like, I mean, I get it because, you know, I was asking some friends, I was like, tell me, like, I'm a big studier of people. It's like my passion ultimately is like what makes people tick. And so I was asking some friends, I'm like, explain to me why you think, even if you're not a social media person, like, why does this make sense? And they said, sometimes you make content and it feels like you're giving people medicine that they didn't ask for. And they're like, I'm not saying they don't need the medicine, but it gives that impression. So I think this was nice for some people because it was just either something they were like, yes, I agree, or no, I don't. But they didn't have to think too hard. And it's something we all connect with. Nachos. Who
Yeah.
doesn't like nachos?
I think sometimes it's those simple things that will take you out of what you're doing, your day-to-day reality. Whether it's like, you know how many times I've had that same question about nachos when I'm deep and I have no cheese, there's no jalapenos, there's no nothing. And, you know, that hits somebody because it's something organic. Like you said, it's something natural. It's something different than a lot of the crap that people see that is just polished up. So I think that's kind of a continuing theme of what we've talked about here is authenticity is probably one of the more underrated skills in any field that you're in.
Yeah, and I think it's, unfortunately, it shouldn't have to be a skill, but I do think in today's world in 2026, I think it is because there's an actual like step you now have to take, which is to get out of your own head and be true to your core self, not this bullshit facade that we put on every day. I mean, I do a whole speech about this called Leading Without the Mask. And it's something that I am very passionate about because I think we all do it. We all put this mask on every single day, especially in corporate America. And we show up with this because we think it's the version of people that we want. And then what I've found is more often than not, people trust you more when you're just real with them. But sadly, that's like a lost art. So how do you think people go about fixing that in their day-to-day life? How would you do it?
I'm still battling with it myself. Like in these conversations, in these situations, it comes naturally to me. But now you have the chat GPTs and the Claudes of the world that even for myself, like I use it all the time. It helps me with my workflow. It helps me with organization. And so a couple days ago, my mom got mad at me for something, right? And I'm like, oh man, I don't know how to respond to her. So I was like, I'm gonna dump this into ChatGPT and I'm gonna have ChatGPT respond to my mom. And one of the first things she says, because she's already like annoyed with me, she's like, stop using ChatGPT to talk to me. It was like all the years that she's known
It
me.
was so glaringly obvious you didn't write it.
Yeah. Because in my head, I'm like, oh, this is good stuff. It's almost like I just talked to a therapist and I'm just going to go straight to my mom with this crap. And she's like, don't do that. Like she knew instantly. And I feel like
She
that's a
said,
thing.
sir, I brought you into this world. I know what you sound like, and that damn sure isn't it.
Right. But it's a thing. I mean, within like my client relations role at Middle West Spirits, it's like there's a balance because technology now is amazing. The things that we can do with technology and AI is awesome. But even myself, I'm finding the balance of where do I put myself, my true self in, and when is, leaning into the technology the best case, Because I've had a couple instances where it's like I use that, but then I'm like, I probably should have just done that myself and led with authenticity instead of just thinking from the professional standpoint or the polished standpoint that like AI can bring. So it's a battle. Like every day I face it. I'm like, should I go with the polished AI version or this real version, that we have here? So it's just learning as we go because everything is, in that world is so new. So just figuring out how do you be your most authentic self while adapting to what the world is becoming.
Yeah, and it's tricky because look, there's a lot of valid concerns around AI. I mean, you see things with people talking about there's the environmental concerns, which some of that though I'm not trying to invalidate it, but I do think people should take a step into learning more about like closed loop systems when it comes to water and things like that. And I'm not trying to make this an AI podcast, but I do think people need to go a step below the research that they initially have found or headline they've seen and ask some questions. But there is, I think, a really important piece of this, which is less about the technology itself and more about what does it do to our brains. I'll never forget this conversation as long as I live. I was this is one of the nerdiest things about me. I was editor in chief of my school paper in high school, and I went to IU for a journalism camp. I swear that's what it was.
I love
The
that.
school sent me there to do it. And I met this woman who I remember we were sitting there having a conversation about something we were working on for the project for a camp that week. And I was like, I couldn't remember something for the life of me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to quickly Google it because we were just starting to get to that point where you could like Google on your phones and stuff. And she was like, stop, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm looking up the answer. I mean, I just can't think of it. And she's like, you can think of it. You know the answer. Give yourself a second to do that. Because if you go to this machine every time, at some point it's going to do the thinking for you. And I was like, wow, I never thought. I was just trying to get the answer faster.
Right.
And I think about that daily. And she probably doesn't remember I exist, but that will stick with me forever because I think it's such an important part of the AI. And look, and I'm just as guilty as anybody, like trying to, whether you AI or Google, whatever your mode of operation to get information is, we've been leaning on technology for quite some time. And I do think it's an important piece of us all to say, am I losing myself in this process? Am I lacking my critical thinking abilities? And is this helping me get where I'm going, or is it inhibiting the long-term effect of my ability to think through this in the future? So how do you navigate those waters?
I think this is a perfect, like, full circle moment in this conversation. You just, like, dished it up on a silver platter, because I've thought about it a lot with these barrels, and I think it's where we're at as a civilization. I'm a '90s kid. I was born in 1990, so, we didn't have cell phones. We had dial-up internet. It was a simpler time,
91, I'm with you. I was right in the
see?
same lane.
So we, this generation, our generation, we got to see the pre-internet And then, going into our teens, we really got to see, the ramp up of MySpace and all this stuff. So I feel like my barrels are kind of like that for me because whiskey barrels, for the most part, have been unchanged for centuries, centuries upon centuries. And a lot of people, even like the newer generation, they're so into technology that the past kind of gets disregarded, the old ways that worked, and there's a tried and true way of doing things. There's people in the whiskey world, they're trying to make something taste like a 9-year whiskey, but they're trying to do it in a machine and do it in 3 days. And it's like barrels are barrels for a reason. They've worked for centuries for a reason. You can technology that up all you want. But the fusion of what my whiskey barrel with the Cervita machine in it represents to me, it's kind of that hybrid. It's how do we take the past, what's been tried and true, and how do we blend that with like just the cool shit that's coming, the cool tech that's coming that's actually very helpful. People can say what they want about AI or data centers, and I get it. I get concerns, with what's going on. But if it can be done right, I have hundreds of tools in this little workspace that I have. AI is like a tool, maybe it's like my drill. I don't need it for everything. I'm not going to hammer with my drill, but when I need my drill, it's a very, very helpful tool to have. So I think that's just the point that we're getting to. People need to understand that if we can blend the old world, which is, whiskey barrels that have been unchanged, with the new tech, that's what's going to decide the future. That's what's really going to be the defining factor for, can we get our shit together, I guess.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Well, I could have this conversation a million times further, but the thing I want to leave, I think what you described is, you said, it's a perfect kind of full circle moment for this podcast. But you're definitely welcome back on. But in the interim, if people want to know more about Middle West Spirits or they want to know more about Seabus Barrels, where can they find you?
So we'll start with Middle West. Go online. Middle West is up and coming, one of the 10th largest distilleries in America. Um, Absolutely massive, crazy amounts of whiskey barrels, amazing products. Middle West just acquired Old Elk within the last year, which is what we were drinking on today. If you guys haven't had Old Elk or Middle West, I definitely suggest you go out and try it. Fantastic stuff. For Seabus barrels, we're mostly focused on social media right now. My partnership with the Cervita machine, the barrels with the Cervita machine are actually sold through their website. So if you look up the Cervita drink dispensing machine, you can order a barrel or even just the machine if you want to get crafty and woodwork yourself in your garage. Um, but yeah, check us out, Seabus Barrels, Facebook, Instagram. If you have any questions about what we do, feel free to reach out anytime.
Absolutely. And reach out to me as well, too, for those who follow us on there. But as always, everybody, be kind to each other, and we'll see you next time.